in the name of their climate change, they're killing off like all of this sea life.
Mhm.
And we hear nothing from them. And like maybe they should start speaking up about all the toxic waste that's getting into our water supply as all of these manufacturing plants and farms are exploding. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody, welcome to Weird Wednesday. So, for today's Weird Wednesday, Stephanie and I decided to do another episode on all the weird shit that's going on with the climate agenda and the food crisis and all the other fun stuff. So, I'm going to start it off with an article I found about how Italy is saying no to eating bugs. So, Stephanie, you and I have discussed this several times on the podcast, how most of Europe is basically in bed with the World Economic Forum, and everyone is spending millions of dollars in funding towards climate-friendly meat alternatives and basically destroying the traditional farming industry in favor of fake meat and eating bugs. Well, Italy has decided to take a stand against this. And apparently, they are becoming the first country to approve a bill banning the production and use of lab manufactured food and animal feed. So, according to Italy's Prime Minister of Agriculture, Francesco Lollobrigida, I'm sure I said that
Good
wrong.
job.
But he said, quote, a battle of civilizations in defense of citizens' health, of our production model, of our quality, of our culture, simply our food sovereignty. Italy is the first nation in the world to say no to synthetic foods. And he further stated, laboratory products, in our opinion, do not guarantee quality, well-being, and the production of our culture and tradition. So this I thought was really cool. They are actually going to have fines of up to 60,000 euros, which is the equivalent of $65,144 for failure to comply. And if this proposal is passed by Parliament, food production from cell cultures or tissues from vertebrate animals will not be allowed in the country. And then in addition to these fines, the proposal includes shutting down any producers who violate the law and then restricting them from obtaining any public funds for up to 3 years. So I guess Italy's prime minister, Giorgia Meloni, is apparently a super right-wing member of the Brothers of Italy party, and his administration is against promoting insects as a sustainable food alternative, which, by the way, Stephanie, apparently back in January, the European Commission approved 2 more insect species for human consumption, even after acknowledging that there were concerns about bugs triggering allergies. So now there's apparently 4 different types of mealworms and crickets that the World Economic Forum and the European Commission are promoting to be used in frozen, paste, dried, and powder forms. But anyway, of course, there's a lot of opposition from the World Economic Forum leftist organizations and all the NGOs in Europe in regards to this Italian bill. And the proponents of eating bugs and fake meat are complaining that this law is going to hold back scientific progress and climate mitigation efforts. So there's an international NGO, again, non-governmental organization in Europe called the Good Food Institute. And they promote plant-based and lab manufactured meat. And their head of policy is Alice Racencroft. And she said that, quote, Italy will be left behind as the rest of Europe and the world progress toward a more sustainable and secure food system. And then she further stated that 54% of Italians who want to try cultivated meat will be banned from doing so, and that this is stifling consumer freedom. But you know what stifles consumer freedom, Alice? Shutting down fucking legitimate farms and getting rid of real meat production.
Yeah, Alice. I mean, I would want to be left behind if the alternative is mealworms. Like just saying that makes me like, ugh, like I just want to gag. That's so nasty.
Would you
So
prefer like frozen or in powder?
I know, or maybe a paste. Like, what do you even do with that? Like, put it on a piece of bread? I mean, come on, this is disgusting. And then I just, yeah, it sounds like crunchy and gross. So Tucker Carlson just did a snippet from his new documentary that I think is coming out like later on. But he did release a snippet that's about this very issue and how it's being tested right now in the Netherlands, where they're starting to create these bug farms for people to eat as food. So listen to this clip.
Is famous for its agricultural output. Now it's famous for insects. This feels like the leading edge of a global trend. Do you think that it is?
Absolutely. There's no surprise there. I mean, my country really is sadly the pilot country for an organization like the World Economic Forum. We are sort of the tester kit of the 2030 agenda. So the fact that we, the second largest exporter of agricultural products in the world, our nation with such a rich farming history is now cracking down on its farms and opening insect factories should be of no surprise to you. And, this is not something that is just going to affect the food supply of the Netherlands. Like I said, we're the second largest exporter of agricultural products in the world after America. So this will influence the food supply worldwide. And we've spoken to farmers who said, well, this could lead to actual starvation if we're not careful.
Isn't that a great point? Like they're going after these farmers all in the name of like sustainability. But yeah, what happens when you have the biggest producer of agriculture next to the US no longer able to do it? Like there could be starvation. Like if this whole thing doesn't work out, it's absolutely insane. And despite the fact that eating bugs is absolutely disgusting, there are serious reasons to consider banning it everywhere. And I think Italy is right in doing this. So first of all, just like you said, Tara, they have found this is proven now that bugs cause just as severe of allergies and allergic reactions as shellfish. So that's concerning. Like, what if, you are allergic and you can't eat bugs and you've just gotten rid of all the farming and the meat, and then they're also filled with harmful bacteria. So this is so disgusting, but it says how insects feed on decaying matter. Like that is their food source. So rotting food, animal corpses, human waste, which are all full of bacteria. Freaking disgusting. And then there's the risk of microbial fauna and spore-bearing bacteria that find its way into farmed bugs that we would actually use for food. So the insects need to be bred in this clean environment. However, a lot of the insect farms don't have these hygienic standards. So they can carry pesticides that are harmful and can even be deadly, as well as, all this bacteria.
Are they going to say just cook it like you do with chicken and make sure it's not raw?
I don't know, but like, can you even cook it at that point? I mean, think about like E. coli and stuff that would come from human waste. Like, I don't think you can just cook that off. Like, I don't know. I'm not really sure how you properly sanitize a bug. But then there's something that I've never heard of before, which is called anti-nutrients, which are substances that interfere with the body's ability to absorb and use protein. So they can compromise the nutritional value of many foods, especially those made from plants like rice or flour. Some common anti-nutrients are phytic acid, tannins, and lectin, which are all found in the exoskeleton of insects. So they want us to eat bugs as a protein source, yet these bugs have anti-nutrients that prevent our bodies from absorbing protein. That makes no sense whatsoever. And then there's also toxins, as if all those other things weren't enough. And apparently some kinds of beetles carry a metabolic steroid. And that can result in all sorts of growth issues, infertility, masculinization of females, which I mean, maybe people would like be into that now. I don't know if it's consumed too frequently. And like, how do we know the long-term effects of this when this is all new? Like human beings are not meant to eat bugs, and long-term, like who knows what kind of effects this will have. And notice how like all of these eco-friendly people go completely against nature. They want us to eat genetically engineered foods made in a lab versus real food, real meat. They want humans to eat bugs when we are literally designed to eat meat. and not designed to digest these bugs properly. And then instead of using like natural resources, they want us to use a bunch of industrialized things like wind, solar, and batteries that end up hurting the environment way more than like fossil fuels. So I just don't get it. Like I feel like they're so environmentally friendly, but they completely go against nature.
Right.
And I also feel like this is an attempt of this elite group, whether it's World Economic Forum and beyond, that want to shift culture and take away like everything that makes life enjoyable. And food is such an important part of culture. It's like around everything we do. When we gather, it's around food. When we celebrate, it's around food. Like it's just such a big part of who we are. And I think that there's like a bigger part of this agenda, which is breaking us away from our cultural norms. Just like, I mean, that's like what the Nazis did when they took over Germany and started getting people, you know, to not recognize that former life anymore, or that their former selves, because they took away all the culture and destroyed it. And I feel like that is what is happening now with this craziness of trying to get us to eat bugs.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I like applaud Italy for what they're doing, because part of the reason they're doing it is to preserve their culture and their traditions. So another fun story. Okay, so this has been all over the news, kind of. Actually, it hasn't really been much on mainstream. So last Tuesday, there was a possible explosion at the South Fork Dairy Farm in Dimmit, Texas, that killed an estimated 18,000 cows. And this one hits kind of close to home for me because I only live like 60 miles away from Dimmit. And from what I last read, the cause of the fire is still under investigation, but there's speculation that it was possibly from an overheated vacuum that like sucks manure and water out. And it's possible like the methane ignited and exploded and started the fire. But regardless of that, according to the Animal Welfare Institute, this explosion is the largest mass casualty incident involving cattle in U.S. history. And to put that into perspective, the closest occurrence of cattle deaths anywhere near that was in 2020 at a farm in upstate New York. And during that incident, 400 cows died. So there's a big fucking difference between 400 and 18,000 cows. But Stephanie, like this is not the first fire or explosion at a food processing plant or facility recently. And so, of course, there's speculation that this could have been like a purposeful attack on critical US infrastructure as a way to manipulate our food supply. And even last year, the FBI Cyber Division issued a warning about potential cyber attacks on agricultural facilities and food plants. According to their website, they had this statement, and it was, quote, ransomware actors may be more likely to attack agricultural cooperatives during critical planting and harvesting seasons, disrupting critical planting and harvest seasons, disrupting operations, causing financial loss, and negatively impacting the food supply chain. The FBI warning also specifically addressed targeting seed supply and fertilizer, stating, quote, a significant disruption of grain production could impact the entire food chain, since grain is not only consumed by humans, but also used for animal feed. In addition, a significant disruption of grain and corn production could impact commodities trading and stocks. So interestingly, I was talking about this with my boss the other day. And he mentioned that like none of these major incidents that are occurring in these food manufacturing facilities are the ones owned by Bill Gates or in any of the plants owned by China. And so after doing some research, he's totally right. Like all of these recent, quote, mystery incidents are happening in these American-owned processing plants or farms. And like you and I have already talked about how these train derailments and these production facility fires are happening where? They're happening in conservative areas of middle America and in working class neighborhoods. So, Stephanie, do you think this is like all part of the agenda to manipulate and destroy our food supply?
Absolutely. Like how many more things need to happen back to back before people stop calling it a coincidence? I heard some guy in TikTok the other day and he's like, I'm going to start using the term coincidence theorist because like they always say conspiracy theorist, but seriously, it's crazy. And I think that this story goes much deeper than what the news is reporting. So I went down the rabbit hole with this one. I mean, it's going to get weird. I'm just warning you. So Castro County Sheriff Sal Rivera said that it may have been caused by the facility's manure management equipment. And he said, quote, "It is possible that it overheated and the methane and things like that may have ignited and spread out with an explosion and a fire." So to understand why this is relevant, let me explain what else this dairy farm was used for besides dairy. So, first of all, this dairy farm was so big that in February, it produced 147 million gallons of milk just in February alone. So, I think that we can expect a milk shortage coming up. So, something I found that was like really odd is I searched everywhere for info on the ownership of this farm, and there was nothing. But I did come across this like random podcast interview, and it was with the CEO of South Fork Dairy Farm in Ohio, Evan Barton. And in this interview, he said he operated multiple farms. So I'm assuming that he's the CEO of the South Fork Dairy Farm in Texas because it's the same name. They're both dairy farms. He said he owns them all over, but I couldn't like 100% confirm that he's the owner of this farm. But in this podcast episode, it really got my attention because apparently this CEO signed a deal with Clean Energy Fuel to use his cow's manure to create renewable gas that would lower his farm's carbon footprint and would fill up 52 Amazon trucks with fuel per day. So now we know where like the methane would have come from. Like if this clean energy fuel was associated with this farm, that would cause an explosion that's so massive that it would kill 18,000 cows. So knowing it was fueling Amazon trucks, I immediately was wondering, what the hell is the connection between Amazon and a cow farm? Well, I looked up some information on this Clean Energy Fuels organization. And apparently they finance farmers all over the place. They're like this big company that helps these small farmers, get ahead and finance their farms. And this is directly from their website. Quote, "Clean Energy is the largest provider of renewable natural gas for the transportation industry in North America. Our extensive network of 590 fueling stations across the U.S. ensures convenient access for the 25,000 heavy-duty trucks, buses, and large vehicles running on RNG daily." So, Tara, do you want to take a wild guess on who the number one shareholder of Clean Energy Fuels is?
Someone connected with the World Economic Forum is my guess.
You're right. It's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, all World Economic Forum bigwigs, right? So, who are the top three shareholders of Amazon? BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So there's the connection between Amazon and cow farms. So interesting, because while I was going down the rabbit hole, I learned that Jeff Bezos owns 420,000 acres of land. And according to CNBC, 39% of farmland is rented out, and 80% of landlords of farmland aren't even farmers. They're just renting out the land to farmers. And then according to the Animal Welfare Institute, 6.5 million farm animals died by fire in the last decade, which is really funny because in the last decade, that's the timeline that Bill Gates has been accumulating all that farmland. Like, isn't that strange? What a coincidence. So now let's look at all these landowners, because I think that this whole agenda is so much bigger than we even realize. So obviously, like you said, Tara, Bill Gates, and now we know Jeff Bezos are like known elites that are part of this whole same agenda, right? But some people that I wasn't familiar with owned even more land than them, and include Liberty Media chairman John Malone, who owns 2.2 million acres. And I looked on Liberty Media's website, and they're all about ESG. Their website says, quote, "ESG at Liberty has determined that we can have the largest impact and unlock the greatest value through a coordinated portfolio approach to environmental, social, and governance issues," Sounds like directly out of the freaking WEF website, right? Then you have CNN founder Ted Turner, who had accumulated 2 million acres. And Turner Ranch's website is also into ESG. Quote, Turner lands are innovatively managed to unite economic viability with ecological sustainability. Turner Ranches support many progressive environmental projects, including water resource and timber management. So Tara, take a wild guess. Who are the top shareholders of Bill Gates, aka Microsoft?
BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
Yeah. And guess what all these other companies have in common that are all buying up this land? They're all part of the World Economic Forum. They're all members. In fact, the BlackRock CEO, Larry Fink, sits on the board of the World Economic Forum and on the Council of Foreign Relations, which is basically like Big Daddy to World Economic Forum. So, like, are you starting to put the pieces together how there's something going on here? Like this, how is this a coincidence that these organizations that are all tied to the World Economic Forum are the top shareholders for all of these companies that own all of this farmland? And specifically, like intertwined and financing these smaller farmers who happen to be the ones that lose their farm in like fires and explosions. So if we really want to go to even further down the rabbit hole, until I was busy doing that this weekend, remember that Hillendale Farms that had a fire that killed like 100,000 chickens recently? Yep. Well, they just got a new CEO back in July, whose name is Kevin Jackson. And prior to this, he was the president of Treehouse Foods, who again, top shareholders of Treehouse Foods were BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And in addition to the dairy farm explosion, there was also a plastic recycling plant in Richmond, Indiana on fire with over 1,800 propane tanks. This was so big that the smoke could be seen 30 miles away. And an NBC News article said, quote, burning plastic can release toxic chemicals such as dioxins into the air and groundwater. Health officials say the cancer-causing chemicals, benzopyrene and polyaromatic hydrocarbons can also be released, they said, and the fire was expected to burn for days. Great. So like the same thing with East Palestine with those dioxins that get into the water supply, and then who knows how far that travels outside of this town, right? And speaking of East Palestine, I also decided what the hell? Let's look up the shareholders of Norfolk Southern Railway. Sure as shit, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street own a large percentage of the company. And guess what? They are not releasing, they flat out said they are not releasing the name of the owner of this plastic recycling plant. Why? Like, why won't they release his name? Is it because like too many people are questioning this? Like because it's related to BlackRock? Like at what point are we going to stop considering all this shit a coincidence and put two and two together and see what's going on here? Because it's pretty appalling. And my God, Tara, there are so many videos on TikTok of people like driving by this place as it exploded and you could hear the cows. Like people are posting videos. It's so sad and like so horrific. And we can't keep saying this is a coincidence. And if anyone does, I'm calling you a coincidence theorist. And I think that should be our new thing now.
Yeah. Well, there was another article I read, and I think it was the mayor that they were interviewing for Dimmit. And he was talking about how, like, as part of their duties, they received training on like burial of dead animals. But he said, like, how do you dispose of 18,000 dead cows? Like, there's no precedent set for that. And I can't even picture that. 18,000 dead cows. Like, that's crazy. And you have just scared the shit out of me with everything you just said, because basically the entire world is owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
Oh my, it's like literally every company go, like if you're bored one day, go and look up any company you could possibly think of. And I guarantee that BlackRock is one of the biggest shareholders. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's frightening. So, okay, let's move on to another, what I think is actually an equally depressing topic, but maybe slightly humorous. So last Wednesday, the Biden administration announced even more aggressive regulations in terms of vehicles and gas-powered cars. So they're going to crack down on gas-powered car emissions. And of course, this is all part of the Biden agenda to eventually ban gas-powered cars altogether and transition the country to electric vehicles. So this latest regulation is related to tailpipe emissions. And it's going to impact car models starting in 2027 through 2032. And it's going to require that automakers ensure a 56% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And this is going to force companies to basically start producing electric alternatives. So I read an article on Fox News, and it said that if these regulations are finalized, the White House stated that 62% of new vehicles could be electric by 2032. So that's less than 10 years away. And additionally, up to 50% of buses and garbage trucks will be electric vehicles, along with 35% of short haul freight vehicles and 25% of long haul freight vehicles, which frankly, I don't understand that at all, because are you just going to have the little electric vehicle charging stations like every 2 miles along the highway? Because, you know, these long haul vehicles go for hundreds and hundreds of miles when they transport. So anyway, EPA Administrator Michael Reagan apparently was like proudly applauding these regulations for being the most ambitious pollution standards ever for cars and trucks. And he added that these rules would secure critical reductions in dangerous air and climate pollution. And so once again, we have this twisted woke agenda being pushed that a ban on gas vehicles is going to somehow actually increase consumer choice. But these regulations aren't being applauded by everyone. And many Republican representatives in Congress are speaking out. And one of those is Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, and who is also the top GOP member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. So when the new legislation was announced, Capito stated, quote, "The Biden administration made it clear it wants to decide for Americans what kind of cars and trucks we're allowed to buy, lease, and drive. These misguided emission standards were made without considering the supply chain challenges that American automakers are still facing, the lack of sufficiently operational electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or the fact that it takes nearly a decade to permit a mine to extract the minerals needed to make electric vehicles, forcing businesses to look to China for raw materials. They also didn't consider that the average price of an electric vehicle was roughly $65,000 last year, which is more than the household income of 46% of American families." And I can attest to that because it's less than my annual income. So another senator who had something to say was Republican Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming. And he said, quote, "Biden's misguided policies are hurting American families while helping China. The president's disastrous energy transition is making us more reliant on our enemies while driving up prices for Americans. The electrification of everything is not a solution. It's a road to higher prices and fewer choices." And I agree with him 100%.
Yep, I agree. And, you know, we already in a previous episode went over like all the devastating effects of electric vehicles, including a 4,000% increase in mining, which is insane. And then the batteries have like a 10-year life, and then they can't be recycled. And then we know now, like there's child labor in places like Africa where they're mining to get these rare materials that are needed. And all this is happening in the name of climate change. And we keep hearing about like carbon, right? Carbon emissions, carbon footprint. Well, listen to this clip. This is from March 28th. And this is a bunch of CEOs that are like proudly saying how they're switching to electric in the name of climate change. And listen to the way, like, it's just hilarious. And there's a lot of good points made. So let me play it.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Well, yes, it's okay. I'll buy 5%. 5.
I'll just follow you.
We'll go 7.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2. So that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5. How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Ayer.
7.
7. Do you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This price is right.
8. I'll get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I don't mean to I put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not 0.5%. It's 0.04%. And it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying up.
So yeah, 0.04% up from 0.03%. And then at the end there, he's saying if it goes below 0.02, plant life dies. Like plants cannot sustain their life without CO2 in the environment.
Yeah, he also said that 0.03 to 0.04 happened over several decades.
Yeah. And he makes a great point. As a farmer, it would cost him like $300,000 to go and replace a piece of farm equipment. Like this is absolutely insane. And I was just totally baffled. Like I did not expect it to be 0.04%. And it's just further confirmation for me that this whole climate agenda is complete bullshit and was put in place to line the pockets of the politicians and the elites that are invested in green technology companies, knowing that most people won't ever actually look at the number or look at the facts. And I'm one of them, but now I know.
Yeah, because most people just think, oh, it's good for the environment, then we should go ahead and do it. And
Right.
so speaking of the environment, so remember, Stephanie, a couple months ago, we did one of these climate change podcasts, and we talked about all the whales that were washing up dead on the shores of the East Coast in New Jersey, where they had all those offshore wind farms.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, a recent study in Germany has found that populations of red-throated loons, which are aquatic birds, that these bird populations have declined over 90% since offshore wind farms were built in the North Sea. So the findings of this study were published last week, and the author stated that within a 1 kilometer zone of the wind farm, the loon population declined by 94%, and that within 10 kilometers of the wind farms, the loon population declined by 52%. And they had all of these statistics from before the wind farm was put into place. So it went from like when the wind farm, the start of the construction of the wind farm up until now. So in addition to killing whales in the name of climate mitigation, now we're also killing large populations of birds.
So again, it's like totally hypocritical. Like these are the same people that were crying over the polar bears going extinct, right? But here in the name of their climate change, they're killing off like all of this sea life.
Mhm.
And we hear nothing from them. And like maybe they should start speaking up about all the toxic waste that's getting into our water supply as all of these manufacturing plants and farms are exploding. Maybe they should worry about the fact that we're in a proxy war with the largest nuclear armed country, and one nuke will destroy the climate and the environment. Like talk about global warming. That's the biggest threat. Yet these climate alarmists are the same people that are cheering on this war. So once again, like I'm not buying into any of it. I think it's complete bullshit. And I think it's totally just part of their agenda. And it amazes me how many people are not even taking like 5 minutes to just Google some facts and put 2 and 2 together. So hopefully we can be those people, Tara, and like put this together for everybody. Cause it seems pretty obvious once we get the facts and line them up.
Yeah. And we've just spent the last, 30, 40 minutes talking about all the actual facts. So
yeah. And this is just what has happened like this week.
Yeah.
Like imagine what's happened in the past year.
That's why we keep doing these updates, because like this shit comes out on a daily basis, tons and tons and tons of information, and it's like so much that we can't even keep up with it. And like this is a small little taste of what we actually see when we're doing all this research.
Right. But the media and the people like Al Gore and Greta Thunberg and all those people, they don't say a peep about any of this stuff because it's not really about the environment or climate change. It has nothing to do with that. And people need to start waking up, because this is pretty crazy that this is all happening. And like I said, once you look at the facts, it's pretty obvious. But I just think there's not a lot of people looking at the facts right now.
Yeah.
So that's our Weird Wednesday, and hell, we'll probably have another climate update by the end of the month. So we'll keep everyone posted. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here on Friday. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get our latest episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you could, please rate and review the show. We are going to be reading every single review, and I would love it if you hopped over to Instagram at Unapologetically Outspoken and say hi. We want to see who's out there and start a conversation, plus get all of the topics that you want us to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.